Farm4Profit podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm4Profit podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm4Profit podcast.
Corey, how's the weather been for you so far this year?
I can't complain here in central Iowa.
Yeah. Started off a little damp. You were complaining early about getting crops in the ground.
Right, and every rain that did came with hail. Then we got a little dry for a while, but we did get a little bit of drink there mid-June.
That's right. So we're not only going to talk weather today, we're also going to talk about some key aspects to making sure that our farmer listeners can ensure the best odds to having a profitable business and running a sound farm. So we're excited to have two guests from Nutrient Ag Solutions here with us today. Our first guest is John Mammon. He is of Nutrient Financial. He's focused on helping growers make proactive adjustments to their crop and financial plans in response to external variables that affect profitability. And Corey, what's one of the largest external variables?
Oh, money?
The weather.
Oh.
Jeez.
I just need money.
I couldn't have lobbed that up any better than
Sorry,
that.
I was reading John's background here as you said
Yes.
that, the financial.
Well, our second guest is Eric Snodgrass, very well-renowned. He is Nutrient's principal atmospheric scientist. He is here to talk about how weather impacts agriculture and what critical role it plays in determining the success of every crop. I don't think that's anything that surprises you, does it, Corey?
No, Eric's been around for a while. I've listened to him quite a bit. I can't wait to talk to him.
Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
John, let's start off with you. I gave a high level of who you are. Why don't you let our listeners know about you a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you. So my name's John Mammon. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Nutrient Financial. I manage our field-facing, grower-facing conversations along with a dedicated team of individuals spread out across the United States and Canada with the main goal of taking the right agronomic plan that's proposed and delivered by our Nutrient Ag Solutions crop consultants and matching it with the right economic cropping plan, if you will, on our side that really blends the best aspects of cash prepay and financing. I've been in this industry for a little over 10 years in different facets, but came from a background that was more soil science and pathology based. And I found really in my career that as one furthers their interests in whatever industry they choose, the more you deal with people and the more you deal with money. And the money aspect has been one of the areas that, again, has allowed me to be in this position and to really provide some help for our growers and some insights that I think really help provide the bottom line value that they look for as one of many benefits that Nutrient Ag Solutions brings to the marketplace.
See, told you, money.
I know. I was waiting for it.
John, where are you located at today?
I live in Indianapolis and have for the past 9 years. Grew up near Chicago, but Midwest based and travel all over our North American retail footprint.
Good. And Eric, I know there's going to be at least one of our listeners that don't know who you are. So why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, so again, name's Eric Snodgrass. I've been with Nutrient since 2019. Before that, spent time as a professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of Illinois for 13 years. Along the way, built a couple of small businesses, and interestingly enough, what inspired me to get heavy into agriculture was pretty massive droughts, where all of us are from in this little podcast here in 2012. That was the event that I found just fascinating to study and understand. And since then, just took this deep dive into weather analysis and forecasting as it applies to agriculture. And I've been fortunate enough to build a couple of successful businesses that Nutrient acquired. And I spend most of my days just doing weather analysis and forecasting and trying to just tell folks what I think I know about it, which is, I think in some regards, very little. I'm learning every day how this whole system works. And it's just fun to bring people along on that journey with me.
So that's not something that's taught in college. There's not agriculture-specific weather classes, are there? It's taking that science and applying it to the industry?
You know, there are a few universities that do have that. Iowa State has a program in it, but it's, you know, in terms of what you study, it's not the most sexy thing, right? So you got a lot of kids that come into school and they want to go study something else. But in reality, you just kind of follow your nose to where the biggest decisions are being made. And it's going to be with respect to agriculture, because that boils up to food security, that boils up to big national decisions. And you cannot find a part of this economy that's not weather sensitive. So agriculture is a big part of that. And that's how I found myself kind of living in this space.
Eric's being modest, because any presentation that goes after Eric always bombs because of the level of great weather videos and stories that he has. So it is the cool thing. I mean, giving a finance presentation after Eric's weather info is a bad day.
You can't show videos of tornadoes, so I always win, because I can throw in hail and tornadoes and crazy stuff, and that pales, that rips apart a spreadsheet pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, any financial presentation, John, I've seen Tanner's. It's pretty boring no matter what time of day.
And it wouldn't be as good as Eric's presentation.
You're not wrong.
So, Eric, you came to Nutrien in 2019. Was that a position that was there before you came, or was that made up? It
was made up. I think that they kind of really saw the value in having a connection point on a thing that wasn't something Nutrien sold, right? And so it was a way to kind of provide a value added piece and help build the brand. And I'm glad they let me do that, kind of be this ambassador for the company and showcase the thing we're all sensitive to. So yeah, they made it up for me.
Yeah. Well, it's just really interesting. You see some of these larger companies, like Walmart and McDonald's and Coca-Cola and all these, like they actually have people on staff or hire big companies for weather, because you never thought, but knowing what the weather is 6 months or 12 months from now is a huge deal for supply and demand.
Yeah, exactly. Even just logistics.
Yep.
Yeah. So Corey, what do you know about Nutrien?
I know them as a retailer in our area. One of our options to get fertilizer, chemical, seed, fertilizer applications and anything agronomy.
I think that's the fun part today. Is that was my initial take, and here we have two representatives from not that side of the business, Nutrien Financial, and from the weather side. So that's kind of neat to get a perspective. Now, John, we had a conversation a couple weeks ago with Farmer's Keeper, with Nick Chulois from Farmer's Keeper, kind of talking about what it's like to market commodities in a bearish market. That's what our episode was titled. But I want to attack in this episode combining with weather, because, see, that's how we're going to make it interesting, right? Is combining it with Eric, how making a plan and adjusting a plan can really help our listeners be successful throughout the growing year. So when you are meeting with clients, well, how does it start?
It starts with a plan. It's taking what they're doing and asking if that's still the right way to manage that, because inevitably no plan continues year over year in the same fashion. And we've seen rapid escalations in inflation and interest rates over the last 14, 15 months. The cost of money has more than doubled. You think about that. And if money is another input, that's changed the perspective that our growers will have to be able to cash flow the crop. And financial services won't necessarily yield, but it can provide the liquidity, the cash flow, that space to be able to pivot to be more effective in choosing products that may add agronomic integrity. And that's really the most important thing is just, it starts off with a conversation, and Nutrien brings so many different facets. You see an individual like myself and Eric on the same podcast. Our focus is on our customer and providing all the knowledge that we can as a large company that doesn't have to feel like a large company at the farm gate, by bringing our field-focused agronomics and matching it with field-focused economics that we bring, and then other spaces and intelligence like what Eric has from the weather side, so that when we come to a conversation, it's focused on our growers, what makes them successful, and if they can make small changes and gain some larger results, we have the resources that we can connect with them to achieve those goals.
Do you have a financial plan, Corey?
Try to.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as good as everyone else's, but.
So when you think about building your plan, what are you including? What factors?
Oh, everything from yield history to inputs, what it's costing, cost on the money. That's the big one that's been creeping up, with where interest rates are. Last several years with low interest, you could kind of carry a big operating line and get away with it. And now if it's sitting there, man, that interest adds up pretty dang quick.
So from your side of things, John, what are additional items that our listeners should consider when putting their plans together?
Yeah, Corey, you mentioned just your operating line. I would say where's the opportunity to grow in this marketplace? Because, it's scary when interest rates rise, but somebody inevitably will grow in this market. And having the right access to cash is important. Your operating line is the lifeblood of your organization. It's what you use for cash flowing everything from people to land rent to various purchases. But from an industry perspective, there are a lot of promotional rate opportunities that you should have awareness to. It's no different than what you might do through your equipment manufacturers that you have a preference for. There's promotional rates on equipment, just like we at Nutrient Financial have promotional rates on financing in addition to standard rates. And one of the things that you should consider is how we manage that versus your operating line. In general, we're not asking for crop liens. And so you look at the overall liquidity and the way that liquidity is driven through your business. We don't want to encumber, if we don't have to, the progress that you have with your operating line. So from an unsecured perspective, we're trying to lend without crop liens and other things that would impede that, so that we can provide those promotional rates in complement to your operating line. Because at the end of the day, in markets with rapid inflation, operating lines may not lend 100% of your needs. And as we are focused on the products and services that we sell through Nutrient Ag Solutions, we can provide the best-in-class offers for the seed, chemical, and fertilizer you're looking to purchase in a way that is complementary to the rest of your organization. And in addition to the interest rate market, I think, financing shouldn't be one other worry that you have. It should be how we blend cash, prepay, and financing so that it's a complement, not an impediment in the process. Those are some of the things that I think we bring. That's a different conversation that gets deeper to initially what you stated is what your goals were.
Interesting.
Yeah, I shouldn't be something you have to worry about.
No, it's true. So will you guys lend on, I know you guys are in the business of selling the inputs that you just mentioned, but say someone bought an input somewhere else, will you lend on that, or does it have to be from Nutrient?
It is captive through Nutrient Ag Solutions as a customer benefit and a benefit to our organization. It's off of lending that comes through our balance sheet and in alignment with a lot of our strategic suppliers to offer promotional rates. And so that's a benefit of doing business with Nutrient Ag Solutions, that we have the ability to offer that capital in the marketplace, and that ease of access to that capital. I think that's critically important.
So Eric, as John's doing his job, how much of the research and analysis that you and your team is doing go into when promotional rates are offered or packages, or understanding some of these aspects that go into the planning?
Well, that's something that we're exploring in this business, right? So we're kind of new to bringing in the weather risk and analysis to the whole package of what Nutrient does. And so, John and I, as we've got to know each other the last couple of years, we're just beginning to explore what these avenues might look like for this kind of cross-platform research initiative. And we're doing a lot in that space right now. But I think the most difficult thing about it is that when you think about the way we're going to be using that information, it's always about the future, right? It's always about the future risk, the thing that's, just even a moment ago, Corey, you were talking about, I look at my history, my APH. Well, reality of it is that you're looking at that so you can anticipate the future.
Right.
So there's always this future risk that the farmer is trying to basically mitigate. And what John is capable of doing is offering the financial solutions to minimize that risk. And certainly, 2023 has posed a lot of risk going forward, be it from weather, be it from the interest rates, be it from the way that we're able to, just continue to source things that we need for agriculture. So, that's really the challenge. And I think that's one of the partnerships that Nutrient was thinking of in designing this multifaceted team that we now are.
I can give you an example too. If Eric's looking future forward and saying there's certain weather conditions that are inevitable here over the course of a summer, whether it's going to be dry, whether it's going to be hot, we can take that weather information, knowing the individual geography that you face and your soil types and other crop plans that we have, and plan for how to best optimize those agronomic conditions by having the cash flow at hand to make those decisions when those weather events occur.
Yeah, because it feels like to me, Corey, supply and demand obviously drives the market. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in so many instances, weather is driving the supply and demand, whether it's South American weather or it's weather here in the Corn Belt, or it's weather that leads to the general economic conditions of a nation that we trade with. Is that kind of how things roll into this, Eric?
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. I mean, there was a great publication came out this past winter from pretty widely read publication called Farm Daily, comes out of the University of Illinois. And they just went through, I forget how many growers they surveyed, but they asked them, like, what are the greatest sources of risk for the whole operation, every decision? And the top two were output price, and number one was weather. But weather was more than double the risk, according to these farmers, than output price. So when you ask about weather sensitivity, I mean, it's everywhere. So you think about what we just came out of, right? Brazil just had a massive first crop of beans, a massive second crop of corn. They increased acreage by some estimates up to 7 million. So we get that information coming into our growing season. We then have predictions from guys like me back in December, January, February saying, look, there's bigger factors like we think an El Nino's building. We think it might have a positive impact on this growing season. And so that's all in the back of everybody's minds. Then all of a sudden we find ourselves in late April and it turns cold. We get into mid-May and it turns dry. And here we are now in, almost halfway through or more than halfway through the month of June. And we're still waiting to see the raindrops fall in certain places. And so what has that done? You could say that the markets for the last probably 4 weeks have been trading weather, and none more than after the 3-day holiday weekend ending on the 20th. That was just a lot of volatility, all promoted by the future hope of rain. And so that boils down to the supply side. What is the U.S. going to have while the rest of the world is waiting to sell crop? You got a lot of Brazilians that want nothing more than for us to have a bad crop, right? Because that means that the value of their crop goes up. And that's how it is across the whole world as you look at this. And so, if you would have dialed the clock back 20 years, we wouldn't have cared what the Brazilians did. In fact, we didn't really even care what the rest of the world did. It was really United States agriculture, but these global supply chains and what John has to deal with in keeping his finger on the pulse of the full global financial picture and what that means to the U.S. economy, which affects those rates you keep talking about, or what it means in terms of the demand side of things, who's going to be buying from the U.S., how big is our export market going to be, and what domestically are we going to consume for things like biofuels and ethanol and all these big questions. And it's a complicated picture. It's nonlinear. There's no just simple way to kind of weave your way through it. So what do we get? We wake up and watch the market rally 40%, and then the next day give back 15 of that. And boy, if you would have told our grandparents that we were going to watch days where the market moved 40 cents, they would have just laughed. A penny, 2 penny move from my grandpa when he farmed was just, holy cow, can you believe it moved 2 pennies today? And here we are now looking at limit up, limit down, day in and day out.
Yeah, the local co-op used to write the bids on a whiteboard. They don't do that anymore.
Can't write fast enough.
No,
right?
no.
That's a good point. I think I've heard a lot of our listeners say that they wouldn't mind a drought, just not on their farm.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't mind being on the edge of a drought. We tend to do that in here in Central Iowa. Do a little better there.
So, Eric, to kind of set the table for John's next question, we're sitting here on the 20th of June. Going to record this 6 days before it comes out. What's weather looking like now, and what's that short-range forecast for, let's start with Corn Belt and then kind of expand outside of it?
Yeah, so here's the big issue. The whole atmosphere lost a bunch of momentum. That's just the westerly flow. It just lost it back around May 10th. And since then, around the Great Lakes Basin, the Mississippi Basin, the Ohio Basin, New England, that whole area has just gone over dry. We got several locations in there that when we look at 131 years worth of data, it's the driest such time period, May 10th to the 20th on record. And we've had more storms west. It has flooded out Colorado, Texas, parts of Kansas, and Oklahoma. And if those states sound familiar, those were the states for the last 3 years that we were talking about drought. We had over 2,500 reports of severe weather in the week leading up to this podcast, from Colorado all the way to Georgia. Hail the size of, some of them are 5.5 inches in diameter, ripping stuff up down south. And then you keep coming up here, and we're saying we'd take anything, just bring moisture to this area. And it's only the heavy soils that are in here in parts of Illinois and Iowa that I think have been able to handle the drought so far. Anything on lighter soil has not been able to take this. So It's funny that we're recording this on the 20th because the most critical rain of the entire growing season for these dry spots is actually going to be happening probably the 24th or the 25th. We're going to watch these storms possibly roll out of the northern plains and get across the midsection of the country. And it's going to be one of those situations that if they fail to materialize again, then we have to wait another week. It just adds another week and it compounds. If it comes in, it buys us a week. But the reality of it is that I was walking corn just yesterday, and I'm 6 foot tall, and the corn was not up past my thigh yet. In Illinois, Champaign County, Illinois, I could get lost in corn normally this time of year. And as it stands, I can see the horizon to horizon because the crop is just hurting right now. It's green, it's defensive, it's still alive, but it's getting to this point that if we do not get the moisture in that area, we're going to have trouble. But like I said, down south, they would love to send the moisture up to us. They're tired of it. It's 6 to 10 inches of rain in a week. I mean, I saw a video in Mobile, Alabama, where the interstate went under the water. And it's just, they don't build interstates to get flooded, right? And This sucker was right down under the water because of just how much rain they've had. And some of those hailstones, when you think about a hailstone that's 5.5 inches of diameter, that's going to have a fall speed approaching 150 miles an hour.
Ouch.
I mean, that hits you. You don't survive those things.
No.
And so it has been tumultuous. And like you said at the beginning, I looked back and said, when did we make the call on this happening? It was the first week of May. It wasn't February. There's no prophetic forecasting out there of saying, oh, it's going to be a disaster and it's going to be here. But not the first week of May. We said, shoot, it's looking dry toward the end of May and maybe the beginning of June. Let's wait and see if the storms materialize. And for some places they have, like, man, Corey, you got the $1 billion rain, honestly, last weekend.
Yeah.
Came through nice and steady, a little bit of storms, some hail and lightning, but we would have given anything over here in East Central Illinois to get that same amount of rain. Because where I'm sitting in Champaign County, I've got some fields that go almost 40 days without a measure of precip.
Ooh.
Nothing, just absolutely nothing. So we're waiting. And just a reminder, my little county over here in East Central Illinois, it's the 5th largest in terms of total corn production in the country because Illinois has big counties. They're weirdly shaped. And that's what's going on here right now.
If it doesn't rain in Illinois, even if Iowa gets all the rain, that's a big problem.
Yeah, for production.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you meet with clients, John, how do you build a financial plan that's defensive against weather that you can't control?
It's always rooted in agronomics. And I look back and put my soil science hat back on, and it comes back to that disease triangle. You think about how you manage each aspect of that disease triangle, and you have to be able to pull the levers where those opportunities exist, right? Your typical triangle has your environment, your weather factors that Eric was mentioning. You've got your pathogens, and you have your host plant or your crop. And in this kind of an environment, you look at Iowa versus Illinois. Illinois is dry. You have less pathogen pressure generally when it's super dry than you would if you get a big rainstorm. You have higher humidity, deeper dew points into the evenings, things like that, than you would if you're in Iowa and you just got a big rainstorm. There might be different levers, different conversations you have to pull if you're in just those two states alone. Where you have a big rain event, you might be able to have a timely nutritional application. You might need to be applying a fungicide in an area because you have that flush of moisture. And it all depends on what characteristics that hybrid and variety of that specific crop carry. Those conversations vary dramatically based on state, based on those environmental conditions. But they vary largely based on the individual needs of our customers and those. You could have two different complete weather events occur on different sides of the same street in some cases when hail occurs. And inevitably, having the ability to pivot and having a trusted advisor that can sit down with you and respond to those needs and be looking out for your best interests, I think is important. Eric mentioned a lot of the things that he's done with weather predictive analysis and other things, knowing that 6 days down the road, we have a higher propensity to be able to see a certain weather event could also lead to certain pathogen pressures. And again, there's no better time than the present to take your agronomic plan and review it with an economic plan. So anytime that agronomic plan pivots, you should have the same ability and freedom in your cash flow to be able to pivot economically to make sure that you can't predict the future, but you can sure as heck respond to it in the best way possible for your operation.
You know what's funny about this too, guys, is you asked that question, and my mind immediately went to a conversation I had with my mom. She was asking me about when is it going to rain, because her thought process is when is my lawn going to look better.
Yeah.
But her second thought was it's okay that it's a little bit dry with me right now because the mosquitoes are down, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't want the mosquitoes to come back with the rain. So it's funny how the public responds to this versus how we respond to it in agriculture. It's just entirely different scenarios.
Right.
Well, and Eric, the same lawn example, I don't have to put down as much growth control if my yard is brown and bone dry, right, versus green. So every different environmental condition yields certain pathogen pressures, and then you have that cash flow aspect that comes into it and how much you really want to invest.
Yeah. I was on a guy's trip last weekend, and one of the guys was mad that it rained. Not in ag at all, because he had to start mowing his grass again.
I was standing in the driveway last night going, you know what? The bugs haven't been bad this year.
Yeah.
Usually you're flicking them off, trying to battle that. So that's how important it is to, one, make sure you manage your liquidity or your cash flow so you have resources available to make agronomic decisions that ultimately turn into economic decisions for your farm. It's all based upon, during the growing season, how do we make as many bushels as we possibly can? Is there also an opportunity within Nutrien or within this trusted advisor circle for planning the sale of the crop? Some of our listeners are the best producers in the world. They can produce it, but maybe where they need some additional help is on the sales side.
On the sales side, I look really at the timeliness of when that operating line is positioned to cycle, right? You need to make sure you're matching your sales intentions with the cash flow needs of your operation. That's number one. So you don't reach those valleys in your cash flow. You want to make sure you're more consistent and you eliminate ebbs and valleys in that process. Everything else, predictive wise, really comes down to how you want to sell the crop, how you want to manage it. Are you hedging up front and contracting, or are you selling it more off the back end of it? And all of those conversations, again, go back to having the right trusted advisors in play. But from there, once you have that plan, it's important to know that you've got the cash flow to back it up from my perspective.
I would add one comment to it here, and that is this, because I don't deal with any of that side of the business, but I talk to farmers every day. I'm going to tell you something. The farmers that I know that sleep well at night, the ones that have been in the business for 40, 50, 60 years, I call them base hit farmers. And what I mean by that is these are guys that know the history of their crop. They know what their ground is capable of. They know what they can do to ensure a best crop. They have pretty aggressive marketing plans early in the year. They will sell on early rallies. And what they do is they set price points where they know what profit they would get. And if the price goes up 10 more cents the next day, they don't even look at it. They said, I said I'm going to sell at this point. I have this much cash in the bank because of that. And what they do is they just have a regular plan about it. I've also met a lot of farmers, like John just said, that the time that they sell is the moment it comes off the combine. They just run it to the elevator, whatever the price is that day. Some years that pays off. I mean, I think about, 2021? We had the best prices, I think, at the very end of the season, versus this year, it may have been this point in June. If it rains like mad in the rest of July, and let me tell you something, I'm not making that call, but then we could have seen our normal seasonality in the prices already. But the thing about it is that those guys that I know that year on year become profitable and have the farm to pass down to the next generation or to sell at the end of their careers, they just base hit. They don't swing for the fences. And what happens is base hits win championships. And as you just go forward, I see that those guys have much less stress in their life. But it comes down to talking to guys like John. You've got to have the trusted economic advisor, in addition to the agronomist, in addition to your favorite weather guy, to kind of get through the whole path of this.
I love that analogy. So it was
you love it?
It was. I do love the base hit analogy
because you try to hit home runs every time.
It's agronomic small ball, right?
That's right.
Agronomic
I do.
I have had to tell you before. Sometimes you just have to be happy with a base hit.
You just have to be happy
or
with
a
a base
walk.
hit. That's true. You turned that right back on me because I hadn't thought about it from that side of it. Very, very good. We took Little League girls at the end of their season to Little League night at the high school softball game. Mm-hmm. And I had forgotten how much bunting went on.
Oh, slap hitting and all
Yes,
that. Yeah.
it's a completely different game. You're teaching 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old girls how to actually swing a bat at this young age, and in a short 10 years, they're doing hardly any of them swung the bat. It was all base hit. Let's get on base. Let's move the runners around, and do well. Corey, when you
and win the game.
and win the game, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
When you are doing your marketing, are you hitting base hits? What's your strategy?
I wish I had a great strategy that was like wrote out on paper. I just follow several marketing services, and you get some sell signals here and there, and you try to sell on rallies and where you're profitable. I guess knowing your break even is pretty crucial, or where it should be about based on historical stuff. So just try to mitigate risk. I know I got X amount of bushels that normally have to go to town because I can't store it all.
Right.
If it's a good crop.
Right.
So I got to get some off the combine.
What if you could have that better plan? You mentioned you wish you could.
Well, then I should win the game, right?
I know a whole group of people that can make that happen for you. And
There you go.
I think that's the benefit of all this, right?
Yep.
You need to come up with a plan, first of all, of when you intend to sell. And then the best opportunity is to pull in those trusted advisors to make sure that you're aligning with that plan, and throughout the year revisiting that to make sure you're on schedule. So when I hear you say you wish you could, there's every opportunity to make that happen for this next crop year in a way that you've never been able to realize in the past.
Right.
How important is the revisiting it part?
It's critical. No sooner does the weather change than you should have to revisit that. How many times do you start off the year with an agronomic plan that doesn't change from beginning to end? Never happens. There's always something there. Again, I go back to that disease triangle of impacts that you can have on your crop. So too should your economic plan change, because every time your agronomic intentions change, there's a cost factor to that. And it's important to be flexible, to be agile, and to recognize that with every change comes an opportunity. With an obstacle comes an opportunity to make better for that year.
I got a question for all three of you real quick. Off script, here we go. What percentage of farmers out there would you imagine could at any given time kind of give you their break even? They could say, this is it, I got to have this. Is that well known? I've never planted a single acre of corn, so I don't know, never marketed one either. But you brought that up a moment ago, Corey, and I'm sitting here thinking about it and saying, is that something most guys could rattle off?
So I'll go first, just using the portfolio of clients that I have. I would say at the time of renewal, a majority, we'll go 75 to 80% of us know what it's going to cost to put the crop in. And that's a plan, though, that's made sometime between the end of December and the end of February.
Okay.
Out of that group, I bet less than half of that group track the changes during in-season decision-making outside of that original plan that my clients put together. So now you're talking 30% on a given day could tell you this is what I need based upon the decisions I've made.
Yeah, I was going to go under 50%. Like I think I'm with you on most people kind of have to know that if they're getting an operating line, right? Or you want to know that as a banker.
Yeah, we start with the number. If you're getting an operating note, usually you start somewhere.
But to have it living and breathing, some sales were made above break even, some were maybe below. Maybe you made a chemical change to your pre-herbicide because you didn't get planted in time, or something like that. So yeah, that's a hard one to keep your pulse on.
John, what do you think?
I would agree with each of you. I think that from what I see, usually I get exploratory questions on what if I did this, what if I did that, not necessarily diving too deeply into the personal break-even question, but making sure that those that I consult have every opportunity at their fingertips. Because the space that I deal with in is usually around the gray area, not realizing the opportunity that can come to pass if they have those pivots, so to speak. Mm-hmm. That's where I would see, again, the opportunity questions is not necessarily in asking that specific number. It's recognizing that we have the open space and the cash flow that we provide to provide the right opportunities so that they can make the best decisions possible, being our customers.
So how do you and your customers stay on top of that, John? Do you guys offer some sort of technology that helps track that?
From a finance perspective, again, it starts with the plan that you have. It's your balance sheet. It's your agronomic plan. That's the lifeblood of it. There's daily weather updates that Eric provides, and other aspects that are and precision ag that our crop consultants have access to. Again, it has to start with the right plan, but from our perspective, it starts with the Nutrient Ag Solutions crop consultant, that relationship, because they're the ones that are the face and knowledge center of that relationship, and having the ability to bring in resources like myself and like Eric and Eric's weather updates. Because if you have that relationship and those expectations are set that we want to revisit this on a frequent basis throughout the year, those resources are at your fingertips anytime you need them.
So as we sit here 20th of June, Eric, I had the pleasure of having a conversation with you last week, and we discussed the switch of the weather pattern into an El Nino pattern. Why don't, for this group of listeners, you kind of explain what has happened recently and what that means overall going forward?
Yeah, El Nino is basically where we have a lot of warm water resurfacing across the Pacific, right along the equator. And normally when that occurs, it's because the trade winds, which is a band of wind that runs from the east to the west across the equator, slows down, sometimes stops, even reverses. Now, most of the time, U.S. farmers love this. And the reason is all that momentum that was once down there in the equator gets transferred to the mid latitudes where we live, and that tends to take this part of the jet stream called the subtropical jet. That's one that kind of comes from Hawaii and just races from California straight to Michigan across the U.S. So what does it do? It makes things juicy. It makes things makes moisture available for storms, and we tend to just have enough flow to blow up storms. So if you want to know what's happened this year, El Nino has come through. It's there. But the subtropical jet has gone from Hawaii to California and stopped in Colorado. So it just hasn't finished the journey. And the reason why it hasn't finished the journey is because El Nino is just one piece of the flow, the big missing chunk, the thing that if it were in place, we'd be having a whole different conversation today. Corn would not be rallying. Soybeans would not be rallying. We'd be talking about we missed the rally back earlier, would be if this thing called the Bermuda High was in place. Now, I had explained to another person this morning, Bermuda High, she didn't know what it was. And I said, well, it's not referencing like some sort of, way to smoke pot or anything.
Yes.
It's a big high pressure cell, right? It just sits over Bermuda and it just sits there and cranks. And so high pressure cells spin clockwise. So if it sits over Bermuda, it just pulls moisture into the Gulf, right up the gut of the Mississippi. Then we're talking about pathogen problems. Then we're talking about issues with, hey, you better apply your fungicide because it doesn't stop raining when that happens. The Bermuda High's been hanging out in the UK, or it's been over Africa. And right now it's super weak and it's to the north. And it's let, for example, Tropical Storm Brett form, which is going into the Caribbean later on this week. So these kind of things are the missing components. If they came together, we'd be begging the rain to shut off. That's just it. I mean, it would be that quick. We would go from such dry weather to having too much water too quickly if that Bermuda High came back. Now, the near term is I don't expect it to come back until at least maybe another 3 to 4 weeks, if that. But we're getting a little bit more of a push from El Nino, getting that jet stream to the Midwest to start to give us the lift in the atmosphere to produce some storms. And the first shot of that's coming, like I said, about 5-6 days from now. And fingers crossed, the models don't overpredict that once again, and it does get here to the I-states and make some rain. The only tricky part is if that El Nino keeps cranking, it could push us into a wet fall. So imagine you had drought all summer, and then you're trying to harvest a crop and you can't even do it because of how wet it is. That would be the worst combo out of this particular setup, and I can't rule it out as a possibility at this point. So there is more risk on the table now than there has been in several years. And, just talking about some of Corey's backyard here, we've had in the last 4 or 5 years drought that's hit Iowa, western Iowa. Nebraska was hammered last year. So was Kansas, the northern plains. And now we've kind of put that onus of the drought kind of carrying the burden on parts of Illinois, parts of Iowa, a lot of Indiana and surrounding states. So we need something to kick this pattern in the butt to get it moving, to get it doing something different. And I for sure am happy that there's a bunch of heat going into Texas. They've been cold. put the heat there because we'll get the edge of that. That'll be good. We'd
Yeah.
love to see the storms running over the edge of that. But it's going to take more than just one thing to get this pattern to shift around.
I don't like the sound of a wet fall. Buy tracks.
Nobody does.
No.
Yeah. Corey's challenge for the end of this episode is going to be go price tracks.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. Then we need finances for that.
That's right. You got to make sure your cash flow is available.
Yep.
That you have your liquidity to go out or your resources lined up to do just that. So, Eric, the other thing I wanted to ask you is why are we seeing more violent systems? Or do we just have better news reporting now? Or are we truly seeing, I mean, I go clear back to the derecho 2 years ago. Or 3 years ago now. Gosh, time goes so fast.
Yep.
3 years ago, that obviously caused a lot of damage across a majority of the Corn Belt. But you just talked about giant hail. We've got flooding. Are things getting more severe?
Well, this is one of the most challenging things we have to study in atmospheric sciences because record keeping of these events going back 30, 40, 50, 60 years is not the same as it is today. And therefore, we are able to observe and see more of these high impact weather systems. But the big change is the speed at which we get to talk about them, right? I mean, I saw 5 minutes after it fell, the hailstone in Mississippi that was probably a record setter for the state. You go back 10 years ago, there was no mechanism to deliver that content that fast. Or you think about, the derecho that hit Iowa in 2020. We knew about it while it was happening. The entire nation was watching those videos coming out of like Cedar Rapids, where, I mean, it's just 100-mile-an-hour wind ripping across the area. Probably 10, 15 years ago, it would have shown up in a news bulletin later as to why Iowa's crop numbers were down. Oh, there was a derecho that hit. And people going, what's a derecho? Now we talk about derechos at dinner, right? And not just our Spanish-speaking friends, because that's a Spanish word for straight.
Yeah.
It's this whole concept of the speed at which information is passed forward. You wouldn't have known about the drought in Spain or the flooding in Italy. You wouldn't have heard about the crop-ending rains that we had in parts of Australia. We wouldn't even know that the North China Plain and the Manchurian Plain even produced corn and beans 10 years ago. But here we are watching their weather every single day. And if there's a big magnifying glass on U.S. weather events and just the conveyance of their severity, there's even a bigger one that's getting put on South America as time goes forward. So I'd have to say this. There are a lot more people that are now more vulnerable to weather events. Therefore, you hear about them a lot more. Statistically, are they changing? That is one of the most challenging questions to answer. What we can tell you is this: not using reports, but instead looking at the ingredients, okay, because that's been better measured for at least 70 years. We can say that since 1980, a study that was done starting in 1979, conclusively, this was peer-reviewed, checked across 3 different universities. Tornado Alley is one thing that is shifting. It is now no longer just the western plains of the United States. It actually has a massive increase in frequency in the Mississippi Basin and east. The new bullseye for tornadic activity is the Mid-South, right there, honestly, sitting on top of Memphis. That's the greatest increase area. Doesn't mean the plains don't have tornadoes, but the research has shown that we are seeing more of these violent weather events shifting to the Mississippi Valley. Now, there's a million reasons that that's going on, and we could spend the next couple hours talking about them, but the reality of it is that you've got 2 things. There are climatic shifts we have to pay attention to. But the other part of this is the speed at which news travels about weather events. It's like lightning. And the weird thing about it all is you talk about trying to think about what this does to the markets. If all of a sudden a guy like me says, hey, did you notice there was 2,500 severe weather events rolling right down here? That could catch the attention of a trader. They could start thinking about it. They make a trade. All of a sudden the algorithms get tripped and there's your 40 cents today. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing how quickly all of those things are moving to adjust and make the marketing a crop more volatile. And means that you now have a responsibility that you didn't have 15, 20 years ago. You have to stay on top of all of these news events, which is why a lot of farmers don't sleep. I think it's stressful to see all of the things that are moving around constantly. And it's a very high stress environment to try to manage all of it.
Think about that coffee shop talk that's so simplistic, about the weather. Now with that much at your fingertips, wow, the pressure to have that conversation, understand that conversation is that much more prevalent, just given the source of information that you have now.
He's right.
And I know a lot of farmers are on Twitter. I know you're out there
Right.
looking at all the stuff we tweet, and you're consuming it. So it's just the way it is now.
But he's right. Even if I don't know something, a terminology, whatever it is, I'm quick to grab my phone, type it into Google to understand or be able to explain it to somebody else as part of those conversations. Corey, do you have any questions for these guys? I think that's an interesting lead-in for weather shifting. I had a conversation with a couple of insurance agents saying that they expect homeowner premiums to go up because of the number of hail claims that the Midwest has had over the last couple of years. Just
I've heard of several insurance companies moving out of Iowa. I think that starting with the derecho and then all the hail we've had this spring, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, think about the National Flood Insurance Program. If that starts to change around, that's going to affect a lot of the way we insure crop. You think about the hail insurance premiums. If we have better data that shows where hail is hit, those actuaries aren't stupid. They are smart. They make sure those insurance companies make their money, so they'll adjust the tables to ensure that there's profitability in that, in that regard. So yeah, this is important to understand these longer term shifts and what they might mean to the bottom line for what John has to plan for financially, and Corey, what you got to be thinking about throughout the year and what kind of coverage you're going to have and what I have to spend every day forecasting.
Right, they are very smart because the year of the derecho for wind insurance, because we used to always buy that. It was a pretty cheap policy that paid out quite a bit. I think that was one of the only products that they sold that they lost money on. So they started raising the premium, so we went without it that year. Well, what a great year for that, The year we could have actually used it on 100% of our acres. The guys that did have it, though, man, they came out good.
So Eric, one of the largest percentages of growth in our audience came after the derecho. So we did a 2-part kind of emergency episode back. Gosh, that makes us feel young when we did that. But as soon as it happened, we grabbed an insurance agent or insurance adjuster. We grabbed an agronomist. We grabbed somebody that was in finance to kind of echo the same type of situation that I was in. We brought in a pastor just to kind of triage what everybody's going through, and had such a large growth in our audience just due to weather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's huge. And I remember that morning like it was yesterday. August 10th, I was up working on a forecast video at 2 a.m. And this is all I said. I said, the storm's coming out of South Dakota. If they hang on past the morning inversion, these are going to be kind of nasty. And that's all I said. I said, so Iowa, you might have some strong storms today. And by the time I wrapped that video up and sent it, I'm sitting there talking to my colleagues, and we see those storms come into western Iowa. Go, this is not good. They're right in the top of the boundary layer. They're lining out. There it goes. It's 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour, 100. And by the time you could have done anything about it, it crossed the state of Iowa. And that's just the reality of it. And that just tells you how unpredictable. You realize everything that we've had a conversation about today is a part of a nonlinear, chaotic system, right? There's nothing straightforward about any of this, from the financial side to the weather side to the planning side. It's all about small things that blow up into bigger issues if they do. And that's the reality of farming. There's nothing straightforward about it. And the thing about it, and I don't think a lot of the American population knows this, you can't become a farmer without being an expert in like 5 or 6 different areas. So you got to learn it all every day. And that's what we hope at Nutrien to do. I hope to be that trusted advisor where you watch my content and learn something about it. So therefore, next time you see it, you're on top of it. You're seeing it just as fast as I am. So it no longer becomes me teaching you, but us having a conversation about how things are shaping up. And that's what we want to do at Nutrien. I think that's what the true role of a trusted advisor is to come alongside of and be peers, be on the same level when those discussions do happen.
And as great as those narratives are, you should see the weather graphics that come with it.
I like making maps.
It's like David Copperfield with weather. It's amazing, mesmerizing.
So if I'm a Nutrien customer, what am I getting for weather updates? Is that a daily thing, weekly thing?
Yeah, so I actually do daily weather briefings every single morning. They go out on Nutrien's main YouTube channel. I do a twice a week in-depth report that goes out on Monday night and Thursday night. And I'm gonna tell you, if you're gonna commit to those, sometimes they're 20 to 30 minutes long, but we're gonna talk about everything. We're gonna get it all out there and laid out there, what I know and what I don't know. And then I've also built Nutrient's own ag weather website. It's called ag-wx.com, agweather.com. That's the WX is how we abbreviate weather for Morse code, so ag-wx.com. And I actually just built our first prototype mobile application that goes out, which includes all my insights, gives you historical weather, of course, the forecast weather. And what I do is I do not do like other weather websites do, like other web apps do, which will give you, this is what we think you're going to get. I actually give you, there's 4 models that are forecasting your weather. Here's all 4 of them. Look at the differences, judge the differences. I actually rank them by their forecast skill. So we provide the full context around it. And I think the biggest thing, I know I said earlier, it's all about the future, but one of the things you get access to on my site is all your historical weather as well. You can look back in the past, see how things have evolved and changed. And we just want that out there so that the decision making goes easier.
Tanner and Corey, I think that trails back to what we talked about in the beginning. We try to have resources at Nutrient and Nutrient Ag Solutions so that we put the decision making at our customers' fingertips so they have all of the options on the table. You look at exactly what Eric outlined just now with the 4 different weather options that you could have with predictive analysis. It's no different from financing. It's making sure you have the balance of cash, prepay, financing at your fingertips so that you can make the best decisions, but then go back to somebody and ask those questions of, hey, what if? So that that coffee shop talk doesn't just become a conversation with you and your phone. You have actually somebody else sitting across from you, be able to bounce those ideas off of that you can gain some assurance with and put the best plan forward.
I love this. Well, gentlemen, at the end of every episode, we ask our guests the same question over a 4 to 6 month period of time. So while I kind of summarize what we talked about today, be thinking about what you would go back and tell yourself at age 18 if you had the opportunity to do so. So if you could go back, stand next to yourself, whether you're going to listen or not, what would you tell yourself at age 18? So think about that, listeners. We had John and Eric here from Nutrient Ag Solutions. We talked farm financial planning on top of making sure we understand where we're sitting weather-wise. It's never the same year over year. So the plan has to change.
It's never the same year?
It's never the same year. Never. Whether it's market trends, whether it's weather trends, whether it's you turning older.
Yeah. Can never go back.
But that's why we have trusted advisors. That's exactly why we take a look at an agronomic plan to blend that with a financial plan and make sure that when one pivots, the other has the ability to pivot also. So if you're wanting to make an agronomic change, make sure you've worked on the financial side that affords you to do so. If you make an agronomic change, making sure that you understand financially what impact that has to your operation. Watch your cash flow needs, time your cash flow with payments and bills and those responsibilities, and revisit it on a frequent basis. Eric made a really good comment that I liked, taking base hits. Base hit farmers tend to win the game. Hit base hit after base hit after base hit, managing your susceptibility to getting out, and win the game by continuing to score runs. We're seeing a shift in our weather patterns. We've recently shifted into an El Nino phase. We are waiting for the Bermuda high, if I remember correctly, to move into a more traditional positioning that hopefully brings us a chance of rain by the time this episode airs for some of our friends in the eastern I states. Ultimately, we're looking at continuing to predict the unpredictable and mainly just having the best tools available to react and those trusted partners to consult when something does change. So, gentlemen, that was my best shot at a summary. What would you go back and tell yourself at age 18? And, John, I'm making you go first.
I've actually been able to have this conversation, and I think Eric too a little bit, because we do present a lot at the FFA National Conference. And what I usually encourage others at that age to do is to be agile, is to surround yourself with the right people, but be open to change. Knowing that what an individual feels their future may be could change at a moment just as fast as the weather. And it's important to understand that I go back again to my first comment, that the further you get in whatever career you're in, the more you're going to manage people, and the more you're going to manage money. And it's to be cognizant of how you can make an impact for others through both of those, And if you're open to learn, the rest will take care of itself over time.
Nice. Eric.
This is simple. Buy Tesla at $7 and Bitcoin at a nickel.
There you go.
Done.
Very.
So
Yeah.
we don't have to worry about farming.
Apple too.
Yeah.
That is great.
No,
I love that. We've been waiting for an answer like that.
That is pretty
Simple.
Everything else will follow.
Yes.
that's right.
Corey, let's wrap them up with a challenge.
My challenge is Eric had mentioned you need, farmers, you got to be experts at like 5 or 6 things, and I would say, that's doing a lot. There's probably like 30 things that someone needs to be an expert on. So surround yourself, like John said, with the right people, whether that's Nutrien or whether that's someone else locally. Mm-hmm. Get people that are good on your team. It seems like Nutrien's a good choice for that. I mean, going above and beyond with the financials, hiring weather people that, not a lot of people, not a lot of companies have that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. I'm going to add a challenge.
Go ahead.
A lot of our listeners have you on social media,
Mm-hmm.
Snapchat. Some even have your cell phone number.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to challenge them to follow up with you to see if you've put your grain marketing plan together yet.
Okay.
I was going to say the same thing.
I love it, John. Eric, John, thank you so much for everything that you've done today. Why don't one of you kind of give our listeners a way that they could follow up more with Nutrien and what you guys are doing? John, go first.
Yeah, for me, I'm on LinkedIn, but everything that we do flows through our Nutrien Ag Solutions crop consultant. And the more connected you are with them, the more you're connected with either myself or the resources that we have in the field. And that's how we bring ourselves to market. You can also go to nutrienfinancial.com to learn more. Turn it over to Eric.
Yeah, 2 easy ways. Go to YouTube, search Nutrien Ag Solutions Ag Forecast. You'll land on my stuff right away. And again, check out the website we built, ag-wx.com.
Awesome.
Do you got any hot takes for the end of the show, Eric? If we don't get rain in Illinois in June, what's the price of new crop corn?
Oh, mercy.
$7?
I don't do. So I've always told people in the past, you want a 7 in front of the price of corn, you got to hit Illinois and Iowa and Indiana hard. And that's it. And if you clip part of Minnesota and knock out eastern Nebraska, then there's an 8 or a 9 in front of it. And we've done some damage on those acres right now, which makes these rains coming up absolutely critical. And if they do not manifest themselves, we will see the markets run with weather until they don't.
No. Very
Well
volatile. Weather markets are crazy.
Well said. Listeners, we thank you for hanging out with us too. So until next time, have a good one.